Howdy, folks. Today we're going to start off with a question. What do these three things have in common? An abstract work of art by Jackson Pollock, a senator from the 1950s called Joseph McCarthy, and our main man, JP, John Proctor. Well, the answer, maybe surprisingly, is communism. And not just communism as an idea, but specifically American fear of communism. And so this is what we're going to explore today is what is the connection? How did this connection even come about when this play was written? So the big ideas that we're going to work on is really determining the main idea. And here we're taking a wide look at figuring out the main idea of this entire play so far, the Crucible. And then we're going to try to start to allude to some support for that main idea by looking at the play itself, by looking at the author who created it, and by looking at the historical context, not just of the Salem witch trials, but of the political climate that it was created in the 1950s. To help us do this, we're going to practice some skills of inference. So basically taking a look at something and drawing a conclusion based on what we see, both explicitly and implicitly. So let's do an easy example here. So I've got a student's backpack all unpacked here. And explicitly, I see a lot of school supplies. I see folders, I see planners, notebooks, computers. So that's explicitly what I see. Implicitly, I could suggest that this is a college student. My guess is they'd be a college student because they've got the Science of Forensic Etymology as a textbook. Don't think that's a high school class. They've got, a number of calculators. They're obviously very organized. They've got their snacks all planned out. My guess is this would be a college student. At least I hope it wouldn't be a high school student because it does have a knife in the backpack. Probably shouldn't have that in college either. But by looking at what I see explicitly, like what is there, tying the things together, I can look at the implicit things that are stated and make a conclusion based on that. So that's what the inference is looking at these things, seeing how they connect together. I can make a pretty strong judgment about where this person is heading, probably off to a college class. I can do this same strategy for looking at some framing techniques, right? So explicitly, here's a frame from Act 3 of the Crucible, where I see John Proctor, his wife, and Abigail Williams. And explicitly, I just see those three standing in what turned out to be a courtroom. I see the girls, I see the bailiff, and that's literally what's there. But implicitly, I can start looking at what's implied by having these actors stand in such a way and framing the shot in such a way, right? I'm noticing that the director took care to show me all three of these characters and the separation between these three characters. None of them are touching. Even the wife and John Proctor aren't close. They're about the same distance away from Abigail. I also can notice that there are girls behind Abigail and there's nobody behind John. In fact, the director was so careful to frame this shot is that there are actually people behind John, but we don't see them in this shot. The director made that choice to make sure they couldn't be seen. And lastly, I noticed this guy. This is the bailiff. He's like the policeman of the court. He is on Abigail's side, not on John's side. Small detail, but an important detail, because I could make this inference that the support in the courtroom is unfortunately behind Abigail Williams. It's not behind John Proctor. And poor Elizabeth Proctor seems to be torn between the two. Like she's having to make a choice of who to support or what's going to happen based on her decision in Act 3. So going from an implicit to making that conclusion about what this scene is showing us. And we can do this pretty easily with single images or when we're looking at one thing. This starts to get a little bit harder when we start comparing bigger things, and specifically bigger things that aren't necessarily clearly explicitly connected. So we're going to work on this skill. It's called synthesis. This is a new verb for you all. What synthesis means is to combine usually a number of things, 2, 3, 4, 5, into one coherent whole. And by doing this, we're going to get to figure out what the main idea is about the Crucible. So we're not just going to look at the historical context of the Salem witch trials, though that's going to play a part of it. We're not just going to look at what happens in the play, because that's only, again, one part of the main idea. We're also going to take a look at the author's intent. Arthur Miller actually wrote an article called Why I Wrote the Crucible, so that's really going to help us understand what this play is about. And then we'll also have to take a look at the historical context of when the play was written. And these two are what we're explicitly going to look at today. So if we kind of take a look at this back in our same format of taking a look at what do we explicitly see or what do we explicitly know about this political climate in the 1950s, which you're going to learn about, called the Red Scare, and what's going on in the Salem witch trials and in the Crucible, I can start to draw conclusions. I can look at what is implied between the connections between these two things and come up with an inference about what the main idea is of this play. So our goal is going to be determine the main idea of the play. We're going to look at the big picture here. And we're going to get there by examining the context from the movie, like what happens in the movie, what happened in the Salem witch trials, and how does this all connect to this idea of the Red Scare in the 1950s.